Then we see a weakness in the soul of man. What is this soulish weakness? He becomes a passive personality. He becomes a passive personality. When that happens, then if we study the story of Isaac, we find out that he becomes more bonded to his mother than he is to his father. Now that may be a strange thing to say, but when you consider the fact when he married Rebekah, that it said there that he was out in the field meditating, and when Rebekah arrived, and it says he took her into his mother's tent and was comforted. He took her into his mother's tent and was comforted. In other words, now he begins to abuse Rebekah emotionally, because he makes her the nourisher of the emotions rather than he nourishing the emotions of his wife. Please, can I say that again? This is an important issue, because we have seen a switch of roles today in our society. We're seeing the woman who is called to nurture the emotions of the man, when God's order is for the man to nurture the emotions of the woman. We have a total reversal in role today because of that. Can I share this and bring it to light in a little bit different way? Again, I would like to use a personal testimony, and I don't mind using personal testimony if it's going to encourage you to be open. And it's not that I glory in the things that have happened, I glory in the victories that came out of the negative things that happened. But when the doctor came and told me that Lorraine was dead, I had a twofold reaction. One part of me rejoiced, and the other part went into deep sorrow. And I could never understand why I had that dualistic response to her death. I mean, it caused me a lot of guilt feelings. Because why in the world, when the doctor came and told me that she was dead, because we had a good relationship, and I don't want to give you any impression that we didn't have a good relationship. We had developed a tremendously close relationship. We were like one. And it took us a long time, of course, for the Holy Spirit to bring us into that relationship, that we had that kind of bonding that was hard to describe. We did not do anything separately from one another. Even the very least little things in our life, we did it together. We had that togetherness. And even when we were separated, which sometimes ministry demanded, we still felt that closeness, even though we were separated in distance by our traveling. And I couldn't understand why I had that dualistic response, and it caused me to have this terrible guilt feeling on the inside, that why would I react like that? And then the Holy Spirit, when I went to Denmark in 1982, somebody came up to me and said to me, "Harold, you haven't fully recovered yet from your wife's death." And I said, "Well, as much as I know, I've dealt with all the grief. I don't feel that I'm grieving over death any longer. I've been able to take it to the Lord, and I can see how it was. I can see the good that's come out of it, because you won't be healed from any wounding unless you can see the goodness of God coming out of the wounding." And I said, "I've done that." I didn't tell them down in my heart, though, that I still had this confusion there because of my reaction in relationship to when the doctor came and told me that she was dead. And then this person, under inspiration of the Holy Spirit, said to me, "Well, I feel and sense that when your wife died, or the doctor told you she was dead, that you had a dualistic response, and you've been in conflict in your heart ever since." Now that had to be the Holy Spirit, because you see, that was something I'd put a veil over. I didn't want anybody to know that. What would people think of me if they thought that I was rejoicing that my wife was dead? You see, we have all little ways of putting veils up, don't we, to stop people from looking in. Anyway, so the Holy Spirit has the habit, though, of being able to sneakily get behind the veils and deal with those areas. And so I said, "Yeah, you're right. I can never understand." They said, "Well," this person said, "I'll tell you what happened. You see, your wife took a wrong role in your relationship. She became your protector. she became your protector. She was the one that protected you emotionally. Now, I could look back and I could see that when I first met Lorraine, I had deep inferiority. She was the one that encouraged me. She was the one that would stand for me and stand against people on my behalf. She became the spokesman of the family, more or less. I pushed her into that role because of my inferiority, you see. But you see, after I was saved and began to minister, she continued to very subtly exercise that same role over my life. And so she would stand in between me and stop me from being hurt by people. Now, is that wrong or right? No, you see, because unless the woman allows the man to be confronted, he will never change. And confrontation is not bad. It's our response to confrontation that may be bad. But see, she was stopping me from maturing and growing because she was always protecting my emotions and wouldn't let anything happen that could cause me to change, you see. And you find out that a lot of women take that place and become a mother. And this is what Isaac was doing. He was forcing Rebekah to be a mother to him to protect his emotions. Hello out there. I think this is important because you see a transgression, you see a progression of weakness coming as you study this story. So what happens? He's demanding comfort from his wife instead of him being the comforter of Rebekah. There's a very subtle switch of roles here. And unfortunately, that's still very pronounced in marriages today, even in Christian marriages. And what happens then? It forces the woman into a role of independency. And she becomes independent. He was treating her like a mother, you see. He needed comfort. He was insecure. And what he began to do, and this seems to be strange, but he began to worship masculinity. And remember that he had a strong focus toward Esau. Why does one begin to hero worship? If one is hero worshipping, it simply means they have a weakness within themselves. They're lacking something on the inside. And one hero worships to make up for the lack that they feel within themselves. And notice that he doesn't gravitate toward Jacob, who was very much orientated towards spiritual things, but he gravitates and his affections are placed on the one who was earthly. The word Esau means the man of the red earth. He was the hunter. As a matter of fact, he loved the venison that Esau provided for him. In other words, he didn't have that, because he'd exchanged roles, he didn't have masculinity himself, but he drew from his son's masculinity. And you see, a person then that is in this role, in this mode, will become more worldly orientated than they will spiritually orientated. And that's why you see today many men that do not have strong spiritual desires. But you talk about football, you talk about sports, you talk about the world, you talk about their job, you talk about their achievements out there in the world, and man, they're all for it. But when it comes to spiritual things, they don't want to talk about spiritual things. They're not so much interested in spiritual things. Why? Because they begin to hero worship achievement in the world. Is this making sense to you? I'm sure that most of us could relate in some way to this kind of thing, or we know people that could relate to this in some way. Now we turn to his wife for mothering. He abused his wife.